Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Copper Club podcast. The World Cup is almost here, and arguably, I'm going to be biased, but my favourite round one fixture features Brazil, and they're taking on the controversial AFCON champions, Morocco. So I'm going to bring in Ali Howorth to talk about Morocco, and then later speak to Jess Frota, and we'll try and work out what's happened with Brazil with their results over Panama and Egypt. Are they bulletproof? Can Ancelotti turn this around and win the World Cup? Will they be found out in Group C against Morocco? But let's start with those AFCON champions. I won't linger on that too much, Ali, because we try to move past that and we'll focus on the strengths of Morocco. After that result against Norway, a lot of people now who keep an eye on the World Cup who may not have seen what Morocco are all about are labelling them as the dark horses for this competition. But what is the mood around the camp at the moment? Do you think there's a lot of optimism, or you're probably going to talk about it, but that unfortunate injury to one of their star players against Norway, has that sort of dampened the mood a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I think if you ask most people why Morocco are dark horses, they would tell you, oh, they reached the semifinals of the World Cup in 2022. They, are technically the AFCON champions, and they reached the final, just 6 months ago. They've only lost two games, including that. If you give them the 3-0 win against Senegal, they've only lost two games, and I think 42 games or something since the World Cup in 2022. But the reality is they are a very, very different team to that World Cup 2022 team. They're a very different team to the AFCON winning team, or the AFCON finalists just 6 months ago. This is a very different Morocco. A large part of that is because Walid Regragui, the head coach who masterminded that run to the semi-finals, has departed. In large part because he didn't win the AFCON, although then obviously things got flipped in his favor, and it turns out he did win it. And they've brought in a new coach, Mohamed Wafi. So the Moroccan kind of energy, I would say mood, is a bit conflicted because on the one hand, I think losing Regragui ahead of a World Cup is a big loss. He split opinion. He was a very abrasive coach, and I think he didn't manage the media particularly well, which is why he kind of ended up being shown the door despite being their most successful coach of all time. But they've replaced him with someone who has shown time and time again that he is an excellent, excellent coach. Mohamed Wafi has spent most of his time working in youth football with Anderlecht, very successful with Anderlecht's youth teams. He's Belgian-born Moroccan. But his real success was at the Under-20 World Cup, which he won for the first time. Morocco won the Under-20 World Cup last year. And he is very exciting, very tactically capable. And it kind of has ushered in, because of him, this new generation of Moroccans that we kind of were expecting at the next World Cup, or maybe 2034, but suddenly we're seeing a lot of these guys coming in already. If you go through the Moroccan team, you see, okay, yes, there's maybe a dozen, maybe less than that, players with 50, 60, 70 caps, but then there's a whole host of them with less than 10 caps. This is a very young team, very exciting. You mentioned Abdi Azazouli's injury last night against Norway. That is a huge loss, huge loss, because going forward, Morocco have a lot of talent. On their right side, Brahim Diaz has been nothing short of exceptional for Morocco, bar his AFCON Panenka in the final, which he's still public enemy number one for. Coupled along with Ashraf Hakimi on that wing, Morocco have arguably the best right side in world football, genuinely. But on the other side, Azazouli's direct running, brilliant ball carrier, one of the most direct players in La Liga last season, one of the best performers in La Liga last season. So to find out that he was injured in that Norway game and that injury will rule him out of the World Cup is a blow, because Morocco don't have a like-for-like replacement for him. And Hamza Igeman as well, missing out on the World Cup after doing his ACL in January. It does mean Morocco don't have the kind of teeth in attack that they probably should have had coming into this World Cup.
It's funny when all these injuries sort of come about, because Brazil's Wesley at right back, who's been so strong for Roma this season, he's out injured. So maybe there is a slight balance there between the two nations. Obviously, we want to see the best players on the pitch, but maybe that opens an opportunity for Morocco, who are the outsiders, to win this group. But how will they line up with their formation? Because with Brazil, we see this very chaotic 4-2-4. I mean, from watching Morocco against Norway, they took the game to them, and the play in the final third was so exciting to watch. when Norway equalised, the game changed. So I'm interested to hear from you, Ali, as to how you think Morocco will approach this opening game. Do you think that they can take advantage of how chaotic Brazil can be, or do you think they'll be happy to sort of maybe change tactics and look for a point?
No, I think they're very comfortable playing on the back foot, playing reactively. Like, this is still Walid Regragui's team in many ways. You know, he was only left the team back in February and March. And that was a team that was built off of defensive stability. You know, I would say Morocco's real power, superpower in many ways over the last 4 years has been the fact that they're so hard to beat. Like, you just cannot beat them easily. Like, even if you're outplay them, even if you play good football, everything, they just make everything so hard. They're physical, they're dominant, they kind of will fight you for everything. They just are so hard to beat. Where they've been let down at times, particularly in the AFCON, has been that moment of creativity, the kind of the attacking patterns, you know, things like that. And that's why Regragui ultimately left. And I think Wahbi has shown that, you know, in that Norway game, I would say, yeah, like you kind of alluded to, Morocco were, for me, the much better side for the first hour. Then they switch everyone. They make like 8 changes.
Yeah,
The game
yeah.
slows down, and then Odegaard scores. And like you say, it's a completely different game. But I would say for the first 60 minutes of that game, Morocco showed their ability to sit deeper, to play in transition, and to be comfortable both dominating possession, but also very happy to play on the break. I think that's something that needs to be highlighted. Like, even though expectations are higher than they were in 22, obviously, and with this new very attacking generation, there's a bit more onus on them to push forward. I think in a game against Brazil, actually, Morocco will be really, really happy playing in transition. They're very happy to sit in a mid to low block, play on the break. But again, a lot of that counter-attacking came through Abdi Azalzouli, and the fact that he's missing really impacts them. But I think for them, they would be very happy with a draw with Brazil. I think there's a sense that we can take Brazil on. There's a sense that, you know, they aren't going to dominate us, but they're very happy to kind of cede that possession, cede the kind of in-ball control of the game to Brazil. That would be my sense of it.
There's been preparation, potentially not just for this game, but further in the tournament, with a draw against Ecuador and then beating Paraguay. I mean, very different nations to Brazil, but playing South American opponents, and then maybe boosting confidence with wins against Madagascar, for example. Who's going to be the difference here? We've spoken about the players who won't be there, and you've touched on one or two players and the attitude of Morocco. And if Morocco can get at Brazil here, because they are a nation for the taking, and they could be caught rabbit in the headlights with a really direct approach. So feel free to repeat some names, but who's the key individuals here who could like write their names in the headlines and get 3 points against Brazil?
Yeah, it's really hard to know exactly who, because that right side is just locked down. You know, Brahim Diaz has been phenomenal for Morocco. He's the top goal scorer at the AFCON. He scored against Norway. He could have had one or two other goals. And though his relationship with Hakimi has developed really quickly. And that was super important to Morocco, because the most important element of Morocco's team in the World Cup in Qatar was the relationship between Hakimi, Diaz, and Ounahi, Azzedine Ounahi, who played on the right side of midfield in that tournament. Ounahi is still there, although he sometimes plays more of a 10, as he did against Norway. But the relationship between Hakimi and Diaz has been seamless. And I think that's where Morocco will get so much joy in all of their games, just those two. Also, the introduction of Ayoub Bouadi has been massive for Morocco. So Bouadi is a generational talent in the making. 18 years old. He's already played, I think, 94 times for Lille in Liga. He's the youngest player, I think, ever in UEFA competition when he made his debut as a 16-year-old for Lille. He's played against Real Madrid. He was man of the match against Juventus in the Champions League. Despite being an 18-year-old who's only just switched his national allegiance from France to Morocco, he's slotted into these pre-tournament friendlies alongside Neil El Ainaoui and looks very, very good. So I think actually Morocco's strengths are that. It's like the midfield, it's the structure, it's the defense. Up front is where the questions are. So at the moment, they've been playing with Ismail Saibari as a kind of false nine ever since Mohamed Wahbi took charge. He's been all right, kind of very happy to drop deep and again let Azalzouli run past him. But now that Azalzouli's injured, there's question marks over who will play there. Is it Ayoub El Kabi, who has a very good goal scoring record for Morocco? I think he's got like 30 goals for them, and is take notes, a scorer of the absolute majestic overhead kicks. He scored 2 bicycle kicks in the AFCON. and he's probably scored close to 24 bicycle kicks in his career. Like, that is just his thing. He's mastered it. But he's not the most kind of efficient forward. Sofian Rahimi might come in. Again, for me personally, I would like to see him start. He's someone who's kind of not as well known because he plays out in the UAE, but incredibly direct, very rapid, not quite the same ball carrying capacity as Azuli, but really, really fast. And so I think that's where they'll get a lot of joy potentially against Brazil. The other thing is set pieces. Morocco are probably the first country in Africa to really embrace set piece coaches. They put a lot of effort into the kind of minor details. They have very good set piece takers in Diaz, Hakimi, and they've got players who can score goals. Issa Diop is a big centre back, just started playing for Morocco, again, having switched allegiance from France. If Nea Figuered is fit, which is kind of touch and go, he's a very big threat from the corners, as well as Al Ainawi. So they do have a really well-balanced team in terms of where they can attack from. But at the moment, you would say the one thing that they're kind of missing, especially with Azazuli missing now, is a bit of bite up front and on the left, because that right side is excellent. But in those other two positions, we're just not quite sure how it's going to look.
Well, look, Brazil haven't kept a clean sheet in their last 5. They're definitely not bulletproof. I'm going to bring in Jess in a minute to talk about them and how they've got on recently heading into this match. But Ali, look, you're going to be there in the stadium, so I want a bold prediction. Are you going to stick with Morocco here and back them, or do you think that Brazil will come out on top? How do you see this one playing out? I'm sorry to do this to you, but I would like to finish your bit with a prediction.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, I think my opinion of Brazil is really colored by the fact that I was at their game in October when they played Senegal, and Brazil were fantastic in that game. Like, oh my goodness, they just took apart Senegal. They made Senegal look like a bang average team. But that was really Estaval's game. That was Estaval's game where he took apart Senegal. He looked so good. The link up with Vinicius, and I think Mateus Cunha up front, like that.
See, I have a slightly, sorry to interrupt, but I have a slightly different opinion because I was there, and I think every time that Senegal actually took the game to Brazil, I think they were a little bit nervous within that match. Defensively, I think it was Estaval's game, and obviously he's sadly not going to be at the World Cup. But I think when Senegal decided to press Brazil, you see the names and you think that they should be solid, but they panicked quite a bit. And I know it was a friendly, and then we saw a few days later Tunisia score and then and draw with Brazil as well. So they're there to be taken. So look, I'm not forcing you or telling you what to predict here, but I think Brazil's attack's always going to be a concern. Just defensively, for me, I'd be very surprised if Morocco don't score in this game. But look, I've stolen your thunder.
No, I think you're spot on. And I think this game will be a lot cagier than people expect it to be, as World Cup openers tend to be. I think both teams will be trying to test each other out. It's going to be in the MetLife Stadium in New York, which is going to be hot, potentially thunderous, as in humid, and so I think there's a lot of that adjusting to the kind of the environment. If I had to give a prediction, I think probably I'd go with a 1-1 draw. It's hard for me to see Morocco beating Brazil. But again, I think Morocco are just so hard to beat. And I think that kind of resilience, that even though they've had a bit of turnover from players, they have a new coach. I think that's that resilience that has made them so good. And so I can easily see them conceding, because again, that back line is solid, but Nea Figuered, we're not sure if he's fit. Shadi Riyad has come in and been okay. Mazraoui is injured, but for me, actually, I think that's not a problem because Anis Salahuddin has been fantastic every time he's played for Morocco. But I do think they have a goal. Both, they have the capacity to concede and to score. So I think I would if I had to put money on it, I think I would probably go for a 1-1 draw.
Ali, thank you so much for your insight. You're flying out to the World Cup. So look, I'll give you 30 seconds or so to promote yourself, promote your handles, let our audience know where they can find you, and obviously find out more about the African nations throughout the World Cup.
Yeah, no, I mean, you'll find me in various places. I wrote the Guardian's previews for Cape Verde, so if you want to learn more about Cape Verde, please read that. That was a lot of effort and joy to write. But mainly, most of my stuff is on my Substack or on my new YouTube channel, Ali's African Football, as well as I have my own podcast, On the Whistle Podcast, which is all about African football. And on both of those, we've done previews for all 10 African nations. So if you want to become an expert in African nations heading into the World Cup, I've written and recorded videos and previews on all 10 of them. So yeah, please give those a look. You can also find me on Twitter, Ali Howorth, same with TikTok, Ali Howorth. Please do give us a follow. And follow the Copa Club. I mean, I've written for you guys before. I remember doing the Club World Cup preview. I
Yeah,
think for Esperance. So yeah, like big fan, big up the Copa Club, and keep supporting these guys.
appreciate that. Thank you, Ali. And look, now I'm going to bring in Jess, and we're going to deep dive into Brazil and potentially bring some positivity or negativity to the table. I'm never sure when it comes to Jess, but we'll dive into Brazil now and see what she's got to say. Jess, it's been a couple of weeks since we sat down and looked at Brazil's 26-man squad, and maybe we've learned a few lessons in between with that 6-2 result against Panama and then beating Egypt 2-1 thanks to Endrick's winner. Are there any positives or negatives that we have learned over the last couple of weeks as Brazil prepare for this World Cup? Because look, 8 goals, but now it's 5 games in a row conceding. There's going to be slight concern here because Ali alluded to it and how Morocco play. They're going to be very aggressive, potentially get at Brazil's 2-man midfield. If Ancelotti still goes with that, we're still a little bit unsure. But let's go through Panama and Egypt. Plenty of goals, but Brazil conceded again, which is a bit of a concern, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it is a bit of a concern, but at the same time, I'm cautious because we didn't really have our starting center backs, particularly Gabriel Magalhães. So it's a different story when we have like the partnership that it's supposed to be our starter partnership. Even though in my opinion, Bremer should be starting alongside him, but it's hard to kind of understand what's going on there. Even when it comes to fullbacks with Wesley now injured, we still are not 100% sure who's going to pick there, because now I think it's going to be probably Douglas Santos on the left and then maybe Banyas on the right. We're not sure yet. So I think it's tough to be certain about what's going on with our defense. I'm much more concerned about right now about the form of our midfield, but at the same time, it's one reason for us to be optimistic, because I think for the first time now, Carlo Ancelotti is thinking about utilizing a 3-man midfield, which I think for people that follow Brazil is what we have been wanting to see, because the 2-man midfield is just leaving us too exposed since we don't really have top quality fullbacks. So it's going to be interesting, I think. And you mentioned and already talked about Wesley being injured and now getting another midfielder in. Perhaps it's a sign that he is truly considering that. So we're just gonna hope here.
Yeah, I think his hand being forced, right? That's been the whole conversation. Really light in midfield. Why has Ancelotti not brought people? And one person's loss is another person's game. And Edison has now come in to offer something slightly different, maybe more creativity. How do you see that as a positive? Did you want him in the squad? We didn't really speak about him before because he wasn't on Ancelotti's radar. But do you think against Morocco that now Ancelotti will line up with 3 midfield, or do you think he's still going to be fairly stubborn?
I absolutely have no clue. And the reason for that is, no, it is. And the reason for it is I think he still wants to play with a 4-2-4, but I think we'll have to see, like in the next few days with the preparation, what he does on with training and stuff, because so far what we've seen in training translates to the friendlies. So it's something that we're going to have to see. But I think, and I think it's even tougher because it's the first game. It's the first game of the World Cup. And if he starts a game with 2 and it doesn't work, then I can see it after that for him to immediately switch up to a 3-man midfield. What I'm hoping to see is a 3-man midfield and not only me. And so basically what I'm saying is I absolutely would not be surprised with any of his choices here. And when it comes to Edison, I was not surprised that he called a midfielder instead of a right back, because we didn't really have options at right back. And we have Ibanez and Danilo already. Fabinho can do a job there. Marquinhos if needed. They're not ideal, but we didn't really have an ideal name for that right back spot. And as we mentioned since the episode that we've talked about the call up and the squad that he got, midfield looked really, really light. So it's not surprising in that sense. The name itself, it's a bit surprising considering, as you mentioned, that he was not someone really in the radar. But when you look at him and his versatility and what Ancelotti is probably looking at, and the fact that he can cover multiple positions in midfield, as well as more on the right side like win back if he wants to do something like that and offer something. As I mentioned, the fullback area is not really ideal, so someone who can cover that right hand side and make sense in terms of the characteristics of the player. But I personally didn't really have a strong opinion. I don't think he's a fantastic midfielder, but I'm just happy that he is a midfielder and that he went for a midfielder.
I think the game against Egypt highlighted even more so that Brazil need three midfield. Casemiro, who has been excellent for Man United, he's had a bit of a shocker in the build-up to this World Cup. It was his fault really for conceding Egypt's equaliser in terms of how it was a lazy ball forward and then he switched off. And if he's isolated in games, especially with Morocco, who play with a high press, I mean, we saw that from Brazil as well, which is why it's going to be so interesting. Ali said that he saw this being quite a cagey affair, but Morocco can be quite gung-ho. Brazil like to, as we've seen in these two games, like press high when they can and try and force defenders into mistakes. But how do you see this game from what you know about seeing Morocco maybe with AFCON and how we've seen Brazil play a little bit more freedom up front in these last couple of games, and maybe Ancelotti even starts Endrick. Maybe his hand's been forced there after how well he did when he came on against Egypt. So look, Morocco is such a tough game to open up against. Both similar sort of styles of play. Do you see that working in Brazil's favour with the transition with experience, or are you a little bit worried about how this is going to go?
I am 100% worried. I'm worried about the group in itself because, in my opinion, it's like it's so funny to talk about this because I think if Brazil do not finish first in their group, it's a travesty. They should be finished first. But at the same time, I would not be surprised at all if Brazil finish second or even third. So I think it all depends on circumstance, really. So if going before the game starts, I think whoever wins this game, this should be the first of the group. And that's not to take away from Scotland. I think they're really good. Their midfield has a lot of physicality, and it's actually a nation that I'm enjoying watching, and I hope they go through, even if it's third. But if you're talking in theory, it should be Brazil and Morocco as number 1 or 2, right? Obviously, we know dark horses and zebras, but that's the likelihood. So it's such a huge match as well because you're potentially avoiding Netherlands if you finish first. So that's all that added thing. It's not a game that I wanted us to go first with because, as I said, I'm still not sure. And I don't think Ancelotti is sure if he wants to go with a 2-man midfield or a 3-man midfield. And I didn't want to experiment against Morocco in a sense. Yeah. It's not the game to do that. And the reason why I'm scared as well is because I do not know the formation. If we go with a 3-man midfield, that makes me a little bit more comfortable because I think Morocco can really hurt Brazil when it comes to transitions. We don't have the fastest players when it comes to defending those transitions. And obviously having Gabriel Magalhães back because he hasn't been playing in the friendlies will be huge because he just has that aggressiveness and what he brings to that side defensively is fantastic. I think the fact that Bruno had a fantastic game in our last friendly is huge because he can be a major player for us. And it looks like Lucas Paquetá is the one that Carlo Ancelotti is trying to put in that 3-man midfield. But I would really love to see Danilo there. I think a combination of Danilo and Bruno, even though it's not being considered because it seems to be either Bruno or Danilo, but just having the two of them with their ability to press and also to appear like in the line of the box and to score goals could be really fantastic. But yeah, I think my major concern is transitions, 100%. How lightning fast they are. Maybe players like Rafinha can be really important when it comes to tracking back and trying to stop something from happening there. But again, it's going to depend on what we see, because if we go in with a 2-man midfield, I will be very concerned.
I agree with you. I think Paquetá could be the perfect player for Scotland, etc. when Brazil are going to dominate the ball, when you need that creativity, because he created 4 chances against Panama when he came on in that second half. And I think that's really made Ancelotti think, I do need that extra body in the midfield. But for Morocco, it's almost and it's crazy to think, but it's a do not lose game. And I think if you
Yep.
want that, I think that's when you need to bring in Danilo, who can, like, even when we saw his goal against Croatia, how he can, when Brazil move on the counter, how he can be so effective inside the box. We've seen that for Botafogo throughout 2026. So it's not a case of you're going to have three midfielders are going to be sitting back and then there's going to be a huge gap between the midfield and the attack. Maybe it's a case of just being smart to be like, okay, abandon the two-man, but I'll bring in Danilo for more protection. Depending on the result, going forward, Scotland, Haiti, that's when you bring in Lucas Paquetá, Ederson for that creativity when you want to break down a low block side. But Morocco aren't going to be a low block side. I think even with the injuries that they've got, which is sort of really hurt them in a way, I think they're still going to go into this game. Look, they've only lost one or two games, as Ali said, in 40 plus matches. They're going to come in with a lot of confidence here, and the preparation against Ecuador and Paraguay, like they've been alert in terms of who are they playing before they face Brazil. And I think there's a lot in their favour. However, Brazil's attack, let's speak about some positivity here, because 8 goals within those 2 matches, even with just the rotations that has happened, no one, maybe Rafinha's not turned up, but there's not been too much disappointment in the final third, really. But it's all about who starts, because we're still unsure. But Endrick still keeps banging on the door, and an excellent finish against Egypt. First time finish. I think it's exactly what Brazil are missing. You know how passionate I've been about him starting. You're Ancelotti, Jess. Are you starting Endrick, or are you leaning on someone else?
I mean, we've talked about this before. I think when we were talking about the call up and who I wanted up front, I would say that in the majority, for me, and I would say for the majority of Brazilians, we want to see Endrick and Ryan, both of them, starting somehow. Even over Rafinha, as you mentioned, Rafinha hasn't been really impressive, even though he got an assist in the last friendly.
Yeah.
When it comes to attacking output, he hasn't been that impressive, as opposed to someone like Ryan. I think even when you compare Luis Henrique and Ryan, the amount of clamor, I would say, here in Brazil for Ryan to start or to have more chances is huge. It's a lot bigger when compared to other players, and Endrick is a nation favorite. So the pressure is for them for both of them to start, but my expectation is neither of them start. It's going to be interesting to see, I think, because I believe the last game and how Carlo set up the game is how I think he sees it going forward, or at least potentially, which is with Lucas Paquetá in midfield and someone like Igor Thiago, who's like a more, even though he's very mobile, he is not as mobile as someone like Endrick, and he uses the physicality and the height aspect. So I think he sees that as a possible combination. And you have like Vini and Rafinha as your quote unquote wingers, and but he is very flexible. We know Carlo Ancelotti likes a very fluid attack, and even in the game you could see Igor Thiago going to the right spot a lot of the times, and then having Vini central. So that moves a lot. But the combination for me of Lucas Paquetá and Igor Thiago, at least right now, it's something that it's on Carlo's mind. And then if you don't have Lucas Paquetá, then it obviously becomes Matheus Cunha, who is the man that he's considering. So right now it's really tough, because going into the World Cup, and we're like less than a week away, and we are still unsure of what's going to happen. I think there are names that are 100% dead on, like Gabriel Magalhães and Bruno and Rafinha and Vini, but the others are up in the air, and it changes completely how we play. But once again, just go with a three-man midfield.
It's a pro and a con, because look, maybe Morocco don't know who's going to be on the pitch or the system, and then maybe that plays into Brazil's favour. So look, we'll sign off with a prediction from yourself, Jess. I'll put one forward as well. Ali did go with 1-1. Like I said, he is going to be there, and he's been following Morocco a long time. But for him to put forward and say that they can pinch a point is a bold claim. I'm going to back it up. I think it'll be 1-1 as well. I think both teams will sort of be happy with a point here. Nobody will want to lose here. Both wanting to maybe catch each other out on the transition as well. I think it's going to be one hell of a game to watch if it really does open up, or if there is an early goal. But Jess, let's sign off with your prediction. Round 1, Morocco versus Brazil. What's the score going to be?
I think Brazil will win. And again, I would not be surprised if we lose. But I gotta hope. Right now I'm being very emotional, so I'm just gonna say Brazil, because it's what I want to see happening. And I'm gonna say 2-1 Brazil. And I think Morocco will score, potentially from a mistake from how we press in the wrong way. but I'm still going to go with Brazil. And I hope one of the two, it's going to be a wonder goal, I think. Just to make me happy.
We will be doing plenty more World Cup previews and reacting to all the big news throughout the World Cup. So plenty more special guests, and we'll be definitely focusing around Brazil and all of their key matches. So look, you've heard from Ali, you've heard from Jess. We've put forward our predictions for round one. It's going to be an absolute cracker. I think it's definitely the fixture of the opening round. But look, we'll be back to talk about Haiti and Scotland with Brazil. So stay tuned for more from the Copper Club throughout the summer, and we will see you very soon.